A subtle shift began unfolding across North America, not driven by an official policy announcement or by a dramatic statement on a podium, but through something far quieter. Empty seats on airplanes, unused hotel reservations, and business districts across the United States, sensing an unfamiliar decline. What had been a steady flow of Canadian visitors suddenly started to thin out, revealing the early stages of a much larger economic response brewing under the surface. Before we dive into how this unfolded and why it matters, make sure to tap like and subscribe so you don't miss the developments shaping this story. The data emerging from early 2025 pointed to a clear trend. International tourism spending inside the United States was expected to contract sharply, with a drop of roughly 7%, translating into around $12.5 billion in lost revenue. A considerable portion of this decline traced back to Canadian travelers altering their behavior. An estimated $5.7 billion in spending evaporated as more than 300,000 airline seats that Canadians used to occupy remained empty. States that once relied heavily on Canadian tourists began scrambling for solutions. California launched targeted marketing efforts after experiencing a double-digit decline in February visitation from Canada. Border cities long supported by weekend shoppers, such as Buffalo, started offering financial incentives worth hundreds of dollars to encourage Canadians to return. Analysts warned that regions dependent on winter tourism risked seeing their economic foundations destabilized if the pattern persisted. But this wasn't simply a travel slump. It was the visible outcome of a deeper public sentiment shift. The origin of that shift stretched back to a series of comments and policy threats coming from Washington. While the Canada-US relationship had always included moments of tension, recent rhetoric began crossing lines many Canadians saw as dismissive or disrespectful. Public statements claiming Canada depended entirely on American economic surplus, or suggesting that Canada should become a 51st state, were widely interpreted as direct challenges to national dignity. Alongside the rhetoric came a series of proposed tariffs targeting large segments of Canadian exports. These included plans for 25% tariffs on broad consumer categories, 10% on energy supplies, and threats of even higher duties on metals, pharmaceuticals, and specialized goods. Some of the justifications cited issues that Canadian data did not support, further intensifying frustration. To many observers, the buildup no longer resembled traditional trade pressure, but rather a deliberate provocation. This shift in tone didn't only influence politicians or analysts. It sparked a reaction among ordinary citizens who began exercising economic agency in daily life. The response didn't emerge through official public statements. It emerged through the choices of shoppers, travelers, and households paying closer attention to where their money went. Surveys taken in early 2025 showed a significant rise in national pride, jumping 9 points in roughly 2 months. That increase corresponded with a rapidly growing interest in supporting domestic industries. A strong domestic-first trend took hold across Canada. Retailers noted that consumers were increasingly prioritizing homegrown goods, and a large majority intentionally sought out products labeled as Canadian-made. This preference soon reshaped purchasing patterns. Provinces began preparing to remove American alcoholic beverages from government-operated stores. In Ontario, one of the largest buyers of alcohol in North America, directives circulated to pause new orders from U.S. suppliers, creating a direct hit to an industry accustomed to near-guaranteed Canadian demand. Public sentiment also began surfacing in cultural spaces. Sporting events experienced a noticeable tension, signaling how deeply this shift resonated with the broader population. More importantly, consumer loyalty realigned with surprising speed. The Made in Canada label grew into a symbol of economic independence. and companies across sectors quickly adjusted to meet rising demand for domestic options. Travel behavior became the next major indicator of change. Traffic across the land border saw steep reductions, with returns from the United States dropping more than a third year-over-year in multiple months. Air travel mirrored the decline, and by mid-year, flight bookings to the U.S. from Canada had fallen about 10%. Among older travelers, traditionally the winter migration backbone, plans to visit the United States collapsed dramatically, with only a small fraction still intending to go south. Property ownership decisions also shifted. More than half of Canadians who owned real estate in the U.S. reported reconsidering their investments, with a majority citing the political climate as a primary concern. Vacation spending that once flowed reliably into American coastal states began redirecting across the Atlantic or south to warmer destinations beyond the U.S. This redirection wasn't a retreat from travel, it was a recalibration. Mexico, the Caribbean, and several European destinations began absorbing spending that previously headed to American hotels, restaurants, and airports. European carriers saw sharp increases in Canadian bookings, while Mexico continued climbing as one of the top destinations for winter travelers. At the same time, the Canadian economy began feeling the unexpected positive impact of this shift. Domestic tourism surged. From late spring through the end of summer, Canada's tourism sector generated nearly $60 billion, posting a meaningful increase due to citizens choosing to vacation within the country. Local industries benefited from newfound attention and spending. Manufacturing experienced a similar upturn. Companies producing essential consumer goods, such as diapers, personal care products, and beverages, saw orders rise sharply as retailers prioritized Canadian suppliers. Some American brands that heavily relied on Canadian sales even relocated production north of the border to maintain access to the market. The auto industry also responded to the shifting environment. Manufacturers in southern Ontario accelerated plans to rely less on cross-border supply chains that faced potential tariff-related cost spikes. Building and assembling more parts domestically grew increasingly attractive, reinforcing Canada's industrial resilience. Beyond these individual sectors, a larger pattern became unmistakable. The economic relationship between Canada and the United States was quietly entering a new phase, one not shaped by official treaties or government declarations, but by the cumulative decisions of Canadian consumers, investors, and travelers. These decisions collectively reallocated billions of dollars, turning consumer sentiment into a powerful economic force. This transformation reveals a deeper question. If consumer behavior is capable of inflicting such large-scale economic consequences, how vulnerable are national economies that rely heavily on foreign travelers and overseas purchases? As global politics become more unpredictable, stability itself is becoming a key economic asset, and Canadians appear to be adjusting accordingly. The story of this shift isn't about a personal feud or political rivalry. It's about a population responding to perceived disrespect by strategically relocating its financial footprint, turning economic pressure into a form of civic expression. The outcome has reshaped tourism flows, trade patterns, investment strategies, and consumer priorities, producing a ripple effect that continues to influence both nations. If you found this breakdown useful, remember to like and subscribe so you can stay informed as stories like this continue to unfold.